Hello everyone, my name is Lowko and welcome to some more StarCraft 2 Legacy of the Void. Today I'm playing another live game for you, and this time around it is going to be a Zerg versus Terran on Arena. Now, not my favorite map, not gonna lie, but every now and then you do get some really solid games going on this map in particular. But early game, oftentimes is gonna be dominated by this tight choke over here. And as you may be aware, you can actually wall this choke off with one spine crawler. Just a single spine crawler can actually sit in that little choke and defend all kinds of aggression. Now, most of the time though, that's not really gonna be the case, but just to let you know, most of the time, early game is gonna be all about the aggression that can come through that little funnel. Now, obviously, for that very reason, I'm gonna go ahead here and play a little bit more safely. Oftentimes, I find myself to be under a lot of pressure, in particular in the Zerg vs Terran matchup. For example, when they go for triple Rex Reaper or they go for triple Rex Marine and then just sort of proxy push across the map, which is really frustrating. So, oftentimes I decide to go for the gas in the pool before putting down the hatchery, in particular on this map, but really on any kind of really small map, just to sort of like, you know, hard counter any kind of potential early game pressure, because most of the time that is where it's gonna be happening. But sadly my opponent seems to be rather annoying here. I'll have to make us an overlord first, and we'll run away with this guy. Oh well. I guess he wasn't really paying close attention to it, so that still turned out in my favor just fine. And exactly like I was worried for here as well. It seems like my opponent was at the very least looking like he was gonna get some sort of early game pressure out. Now, I don't actually want to go for early game aggression myself. He's going for a reactor, he's adding on a bunker here. Actually, I think I misread that situation here. He was just going for a relatively standard build, but then after scouting that I didn't go for a quick expo, he is just sort of overreacting. Either way though, I don't plan on going for any kind of pressure here. I'm just making as many drones as possible, and I'm just sort of taking the early game economy hit in order to hard counter any kind of potential early game aggression that my opponent can be going for. Now, obviously, because he's going for such an early bunker here, he is also cutting back a lot of the potential economy that he could be getting, right? He's not going to be getting his expansion up yet. He's not going to be getting that many units out here just yet. So as long as I keep track of where my opponent's army is located, and that also does mean that I have vision of the, you know, the airspace between our bases, I think we're going to be just fine. I'm making as many workers here as possible, though, not really worrying too much about the potential aggression that my opponent can do. Okay, we do see an expansion go down there for him, at least eventually. You can judge that by the size of the building. And at this point, I think it is time for us to just simply start droning up. So this is starting to be a little bit more of a wonky game, right? This is not the more standard Zerg versus Terran ones, but that is alright. Once you play enough games of StarCraft, generally speaking, those kind of games aren't going to be throwing you off all that much. But if you're someone that follows super strict build orders, obviously you're gonna have a hard time, you know, adapting from these kind of styles instead. But I'm just simply gonna try and get my third base up here as well, at least relatively early on. And as soon as possible, I will also start, I'm actually gonna start spreading some more creep with this queen, but I'm also gonna be starting up my lair and then transition into Roach Ravager, which I really enjoy playing right now. Now, link speed is done. Still do want to have at least a couple of links across the map here, or at least, like, you know, out on the map, so I can use those to deal with any kind of potential early game pressure from my opponent in the form of, for example, Hellions. And actually, just because of that, I'm gonna be getting my Roach Warren before the lair here, which is just like all around a little bit safer. Gonna be putting the drones back into the gas, go straight into my lair as well, and then I'll be adding on 2 more gases here, as well as, I think we're gonna go double evo. I think it's safe enough here to go double evolution chamber. Although actually, nah, my opponent hasn't made, you know, they landed the expansion yet. So he's completely confused here. Like, he scanned my main base as well, right? And the main base doesn't really show him very much. So he could still be scared of any kind of potential early game aggression. Although it does look like he has decided to go for a heck of a lot of Marines. Okay. That's good for me to know. I'll put down my Roach Horn or my Baneling Nest here as well. And while I don't have a big army, I highly doubt that my opponent is planning on moving out across the map. I mean, he's played very scared so far, and I don't think he's confident enough to really move across here. But just in case, I'll add on some army, just so I can, you know, try and not lose. That would be helpful. So I'm going to be saturating the gases here as well. Obviously do need those as early as possible here, now that I got my bases finished up. But I'm still working here on the saturation count primarily. Now he's actually moving out. He is actually moving out here. That could be a bit disastrous for me, because I don't have a big army, but we're making quite a lot of it. And as long as I deal with the aggression reasonably well, I think we're going to be fine. We'll just target fire down the Medivac here, which we did just manage to get out. At which point he's going to have to either commit here or go home. Looks like so far he's just committing to it, surprisingly enough. Obviously, siege tanks do friendly fire. Oh, I didn't actually think that queen would die. A little unfortunate for us, but not that big of a deal. Although he's actually doing a lot more work than I was thinking he could here. But we're spawning a lot of stuff here too. And he's still doing a lot of friendly fire with that siege tank as well. He's finally starting to redirect the aggression. Okay. We actually have to be careful. We could very well end up taking a lot more damage than I anticipated on that. He's got many Medivacs or multiple Medivacs. This could be rather bad for me. Losing a gas geyser obviously not that big of a deal. Losing a roach warren would actually be kind of terrible. And now that he's got a second siege tank, this may very well end up in a really poor situation for me. I mean, not gonna lie. This isn't looking great for me whatsoever anymore. Okay. Well, I did take out all of the Marines there eventually. My opponent has done a substantial amount of damage. At least here early on into the game. Alright, well, it's time to follow it up with the aggression that I planned on going for here. It's time to start droning up again. Now, you gotta keep in mind, he lost most of that army, right? So it's not like he was completely free in doing all of that. Oh, man. We're gonna need to micro against the Liberator as well, I'm afraid. But this is not looking terrible. This is not looking terrible. I'm following this up with drones again. We'll get one Spore Crawler over in the main. I'll just start doing damage to that thing as much as we can. But mostly here working on the amount of workers that I've got. Just because once I get those out, we're gonna be fine. Getting my roach speed as well as my baneling speed here. And we're gonna try and look for a 3-base saturation before actually moving out. Now, it seems like one of his rally points is off, which is a really nice little pickup there for me. 2 Marines may not sound like a lot, but it actually adds on rather quickly. Okay. These things are really annoying, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. If we can kill it, that would be huge. Okay, nice. He does actually let me kill it. Time to start hitting those queen injects again, though, because I haven't really been on point with those for a little while. And we got a reasonable eco now, actually. We got a good, solid amount of economy. He's going for the wall off there with the 1 depot, so I have to make sure that I also start breaking down the rocks in the middle of the map. We'll redirect this creep tumor that we've got over there as well. And I think I want to go for a bit of a pressure very soon. I think I want to go for a little bit of pressure here very soon when my upgrades finish up. I got +1 armor about to finish up, which will make my banelings survive another baneling or like another siege tank shell, which is really important. And I also have my roach speed about to finish up, so we can go for like a baneling speed, roach speed +1 armor type push. In the meantime, I'm going to be taking the extra expansion here as well and morph my roaches into Ravagers. Although, he seems to actually be focusing on a lot of pressure himself. Okay, well, here's my gas expenditure. Getting as many units out here as possible. We got a lot of stuff, by the way. He knows about the morph now as well. Okay. Okay. Pretty much the ideal engagement there. Didn't lose an expansion, didn't lose any workers. Killed his entire army with losing minimal of mine. I did lose one of my creep tumors, so I'm actually going to be moving a queen over here just to replace that, because I really do need some creep. And we'll keep on making as many units here as possible and keep on running those across the map as well. I may actually just dedicate this queen now to creep spreading and eventually move her over towards the fort base. Adding on more and more Ravagers now too. And we'll start rallying drones towards that fort very soon. Got a couple of excess workers over in there, but I think we can go for some aggression here. I'll get +2 armor as well, and we'll see if we can do some damage. Nice. Nice. Trying to get as many units here as possible. We do see an upgrade there. in that forward tech lab. Not sure what that was, but I mean, we'll take it. And I'm just trying to do maximum amounts of damage here. Now I want to take out this depot real quick to make my reinforcements get to this part of the map a little bit faster. There we go. And now a Liberator is not really the unit you were looking for, I'm afraid. We do get one kill on him. Don't quite have to kill on the second one yet. He's actually killing a lot of stuff here. Okay. Going for the injects here. Obviously, I can't follow this up with a droning at the 4th. But we do pick up the victory. But just barely. Alrighty, so I want to go back to the point where my opponent was doing the aggression here and we were holding on by a thread. Like, that was an extremely slim defense where you had that siege tank sieged up over there, and I kept talking about that I was actually ahead. But now I actually want to look at the fact whether or not I was ahead, and the way you can decide that is most of the time by judging the amount of economy that both players had. Now, while I was defending here, right, while I was trying to hold on to all of the pressure that my opponent was doing, I was also not really losing any workers, right? Like, the economy pressure that he was doing didn't really come until that Liberator harassed a little. And while I may have, like, lost a worker here or, you know, here and there, I don't think it was that big of a deal. Obviously, the fact that I got lucky with my Baneling connection helped me out a lot there. But all in all, I felt like holding on by a thread, generally speaking, right, it's the correct situation. So I felt like we were in an okay spot. So he's gonna move out right here. And at this point, let me check the income tab real quick. It's 35 Harvesters for me, 31 Harvesters for my opponent. So it's actually not amazing. I got 5 more workers in the production right now. So it's going to be roughly 40 versus 31, which is definitely an advantage for Zerg. Even with the mules, right? Even with the mules. And on top of that, I obviously have a 3rd base here as well. So while I ended up losing my queens and I ended up losing a bunch more pressure, at this point, while this is all going on, I still have the economy advantage, right? And I feel like that is really where we didn't really lose all that much. Now, I know it's very easy to freak out in these sort of scenarios, where you know your opponent is doing a lot of pressure, but as long as you try and play it as calmly as possible and use the splash damage of the siege tank to your own advantage, oftentimes you're still gonna be a-okay. Now, maybe I cut it a little bit too closely, because he did actually obtain an advantage, at least economically speaking, a little bit later on into the pressure, but it wasn't terrible. It wasn't terrible. And while we ended up losing the Roach Warren, we just barely managed to connect here while using the Banelings for the surround, push him back home, and then we start the droning up shenanigans once again. Well, at the very least, I'm getting a small army here just to make sure that I got some reasonable income, or like a reasonable army to deal with pressure. But this is where I also start working on the saturation once again. So the pressure ended with about... the pressure started with like 40 workers for me, and then like 35-ish for my opponent, maybe 30-ish. And then I ended up being at a disadvantage eventually, but you know, it wasn't terrible. It wasn't terrible. Like, I had a lot of potential here. He put a lot of pressure into that. As you can see, he's only just now starting to research his own upgrades. He didn't really have very much left over after all of that aggression either. So I feel like while it may have looked absolutely awful, it really wasn't as bad as it could have been. Now, as the follow-up, I do go for the Roach Ravager aggression, as you will see very shortly. The supply count will go heavily in my favor, or at most of the time at least. When you do play Roach Ravager, that is going to be the case. We get some nice Baneling detonations here as well on most of his army, and yeah, this is where we do get the advantage in the supply count. Roach Ravager always very heavy in supply though, so it's hard to judge. And since we're going this many Banelings, I guess it's not really all that fair, but I think he just put a little bit too many eggs in his basket. He gave away a really big chunk of his army. Most of his supply right now is in Medivacs that he can't really use. And in the end, we just ended up having a little bit too much stuff for him to stay into the game. So that's very close, very close one. I'm happy we managed to squeeze out the victory, and I hope you enjoyed watching it as well. So other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, okay? And I'll see you in the next one.